Now we switch to someone who's not in the room, but I hope he's here with us. Santiago del Hierro is joining us, and I hope we'll have him appear on the screen very soon. Hello.
Hello, I'm here. Can you see me and hear me?
Yes, we can see you. We can see your presentation, and we can also hear you well. I'd like to introduce you, first of all. So Santiago del Hierro is an architect from Ecuador, based in Zurich and The Hague. You're affiliated with the Institute of Landscape and Urban Studies at the ETH in Zurich. And his research, he also holds an M.Arch from Yale University, where he attended as a Fulbright scholar. He has been a research fellow at Jan van Eyck Academy in Maastricht. And, we just lost the projection for a moment. But I will continue introducing you. He taught at the Pontificia Universitat Católica del Ecuador, in Rotterdam, in Valencia, in Delft, and in other places. So his broad teaching and research experience is in the field of how the design disciplines can alternatively engage issues that are related to resource extraction and the expansion of agricultural frontiers. So he's, and this is also a core topic of his talk tonight, the question of the encroachment of indigenous territories and how other narratives of how landscapes, territories could look like. So I'm happy to pass the word to you, Santiago, and look forward to your talk.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good afternoon and warm greetings from the Andes Mountains in Colombia. I'm honored to share this space with all of you in Dessau. A few months ago, when I received the invitation to participate in the Bauhaus Matters conference, my first reaction was, why me? What does my work have to do with the Bauhaus? At first glance, my research in the Amazon regions of Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru seemed far removed from the topics of this conference. However, it didn't take me long to realize that there's a lot to say about the intertwined relationships between these two worlds, the Bauhaus, the Amazon. 10 minutes might be short for this, but I will give it a try. In the recently published GTA papers on Amazonia, Sergio Yanomami speaks to Tiago Benucci about the weight of architecture, about how buildings and cities of the whites weigh more than all of the Earth's biomass. Sergio cries out that the planet is suffering from this excessive weight. He goes on to explain that when a family moves away from their house, architecture returns to the land. It rots and disappears. When the house includes industrial materials, usually shipped from far away, they will also rot, but will not disappear. These materials will become garbage. Sergio reminds us that the architecture of the whites has lost the capacity to leave no trace. Western building traditions have affected the whole world. They have arrived everywhere, and they have brought a logic and an aesthetic of permanence, where humans often strive to dominate and control their surroundings. Nature is subservient, both as a material resource and as a domesticated environment. Far from when this pattern of thinking originates, in hot and humid landscapes like the Amazon, the forest has also received the modern project. Concrete, steel, corrugated metal, standardized typologies, and platonic shapes have traveled along rivers and roads, arriving in places that until recently were built almost entirely with local materials and forms. I am critical of modern architecture's presence in this context. As an architect, I feel there is something off about these objects that do not age well in the tropics. They lose their purest beauty very quickly after being built. They do not feel entirely comfortable in this quote-unquote exotic environment. But this is a stubborn architecture. It keeps on coming, and it seems to be here to stay. Many of us, I can imagine present in this conference, tend to frown upon this uncomfortable architecture. It came from colonialism. It was violent. It was imposed. It would ideally disappear. But it is there. And like any process of mestizaje, of cultural syncretism, it has a value of its own. It holds a new identity that seeks recognition. It deserves a place in the world where hybridity is acknowledged, respected, and worked with. Let us not romanticize. There is no unified indigenous voice calling for a return to vernacular architecture. Communities in the northern Andean engineers and architects, indigenous people buy and sell property. Being indigenous no longer means being isolated. However, and despite all efforts by state and church, Western worldviews have not replaced local ones. Worldviews have instead merged. Worldviews coexist. And there is an immense value in inhabiting the space between these worldviews, in respecting the non-pure beauty of hybridity. I have learned from indigenous friends that it is okay to drink chicha and beer, to wear a tooth necklace and a t-shirt, to pray to Pachamama and the Virgin Mary. And with this same sense of openness and generosity, to live in vernacular and modern architectures. Years of being in the Amazon have taught me a clear lesson. It is not about choosing between worlds, indigenous or Western. It is no longer about either or. It's too late for that. So many places are already both. And this is something we have to stop ignoring. It is something we need to embrace. Our jobs as architects, or at least what I consider to be my job as an architect, is not to replace one architecture with another, whether it is going back to vernacular architecture or figuring out a tropical version of the modern. It is about understanding how both architectures converse and how they support each other, of understanding when one language has to step back and let the other express itself. Sometimes it's more of one and less of the other. Sometimes each one is clearly recognizable. Sometimes they completely fuse. Again, it's not about one or the other. It's about both. Architect Ricardo Abella helps us understand this further. His research in the Venezuelan Amazon is a didactic example of this ongoing negotiation between indigenous communities and modern housing projects brought in by the state in the 1970s as part of a national colonization program. Ricardo recently went there for his fieldwork. He arrived with preconceived assumptions about the quote-unquote wrongness of these modern interventions. However, he was surprised to learn that people are quite content with these concrete boxes. They don't live in them. They live in the traditional architecture besides them, and they are happy to use the modern buildings for storage. And for storage, these spaces perform very well indeed. Let's try looking at these buildings through the eyes of the people who live there. Ricardo noticed there is no resentment. There's only a practical awareness of the bioclimatic limitations of these modern concrete structures. And this is simply solved with adjacent traditional constructions that make sense to live in. In the Amazon, foreign architectures are often allowed to remain, and this does not make anybody less indigenous. I will now make a sharp turn and connect to the vernacular modern debate from a different angle. This is the work I am currently busy with, so it's still a raw beginning of a longer conversation. For a long time, I only conceived of indigenous architecture in the Amazon as something made of light, biodegradable materials. materials that would rot and go back to become earth. This is true, or actually, this is half true. On several walks through forests and along rivers, I have come across large stones with petroglyphs thousands of years old. And recently, in the sacred valley of Cotundo in Ecuador, while walking with the Quijos people, we would occasionally pause to admire these stones, and I would hear comments that expressed pride. Low voices would usually gently murmur something like, "These are from our ancestors. We have been here for a long time." As an architect, I was confronted by these statements. Once again, they challenged my assumptions, grounded in contemporary architectural discourse that sets wood and natural fibers as the quote-unquote proper building materials in the Amazon. The stones in Cotundo, however, compelled me to raise some questions about this. How are permanence and legacy perceived in the materiality of Amazonian architecture? What is the significance of petrous materials as carriers of cultural symbolism in this context? These stones also made me think of Sergio Yanomami's perception of the weight of architecture. I see beauty and wisdom in Sergio's words, but I also struggle with them. I interpret them as if there's only two choices, either being fully indigenous and eventually disappearing back into earth, or fully Western and leaving a destructive material trace forever. So can we change how we leave our traces behind? Can we inhabit tropical landscapes without falling into the binary of rejecting or romanticizing? I am currently challenging my assumptions on architectural materiality in the Amazon, rethinking the paradigms opposed to modernity that, to me, seemed so clear. I'm sure now that it's not about choosing one architecture over another. It's about learning how to dwell in the tensions and contradictions of hybridity, to make the most of this conversation. Petroglyphs leave messages behind. They share human traces, traces that last forever but do not add to the weight of the world. I see these stones as a concept of departure for my internal conversations about architecture in the Amazon, about the vernacular and the modern, about ephemerality and permanence. Thank you.